There you
Well,
go.
allegedly now, or now-ish. So,
Hello
yeah,
there.
yay. Well, so this is exciting. We're all here for what if he doesn't survive the first? What if he doesn't survive live? Our first live recap of the Mandalorian
Ooh.
season 2, chapter 1.
Nice.
Now, we were kind of talking before we went live here. It's very confusing because this is the first chapter of season 2, but it's actually chapter 9, I guess, of the overall saga. So we're gonna have to, I don't know, let's before we even do intros, let's figure out some ground rules. Are we calling this chapter 1 or chapter 9? Preferences?
Let's go crazy and do chapter 9.
Yeah, let's go chapter 9, since
Yeah.
that's officially what it says.
Number 9.
Now, here's the great thing, because if this thing goes south in two chapters from now, then we could say that chapter 11 is creatively bankrupt. No, so let's get
Oh.
so let's get started. I am, of course, Ian Simmons. This is the Kicking the Seat podcast. What if he doesn't survive? And I'm here tonight with David Fowlie of Keeping It Real and Mike Crowley of You'll Probably Agree, which is YPA Reviews. There'll be links to both of their websites in the description. And yeah, thank you for joining us. If you're watching this later, thank you for watching. Please feel free to like the channel, like the stream, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Ring the bell for notifications. So yeah, we are here to talk about the recently dropped. It is a couple of days ago, but fortunately, I think that means everyone's had time to watch The Mandalorian season 2, chapter 9. If you haven't, please turn away, because we're just going to talk about it. We're going to leave no spoiler unspoiled, unless we decide there's stuff that we just want to kind of tip tap dance around. You know, we'll leave that up. But I just want everyone to know that there may be big spoilers here. So I want to kick things off with my initial thoughts on this thing.
Okay.
The first 10 minutes, I honestly were kind of rough. And I had this heavy sinking feeling that, oh, this feels like a show that got really popular and knows it. And now they're going to stop really trying. But then the second 40 minutes, like everything after that, I was like, this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. So yeah, the episode is entitled The Marshal. And I think once the Marshal character shows up, or maybe a little bit before he does, things get really, really good. I'm curious to hear what y'all's reactions are, and we can also get into why I wasn't that impressed with the first 10 minutes. But do you guys like this episode? Do you love it? Do you have problems with it? What are your thoughts?
I liked it a lot. I didn't love it, but I liked it a lot. It did a great job of kind of reintroducing everyone to the world, and I kind of reminded myself, okay, don't think this is filler, especially when they have the big reveal in the end where you see, oh, this is probably where the entirety of the rest of the season is going to go, and I was worried it's going to get into sort of fan service territory, but luckily it didn't do that. Everything that was placed in there was actually placed in there for a reason for the story. And sort of now that after we initially did the first season, I guess you could say, of What If He Doesn't Survive, I've watched all of the Clone Wars, every single episode, and I've watched all of Star Wars Rebels, and I can kind of see how Dave Filoni constructs his stories, where he'll have a lot of episodes that are sort of like, for lack of better terms, filler, but things connect to it towards the end, like usually in the last two episodes. And you're like, oh, that's why that's there. And it is very interesting to see that, especially with the Mandalorian, because it's live action. You can't have as many episodes where like nothing really happens. Like if you watch Clone Wars, there's like this whole 4-part episode about this little alien guy who worked with droids, and his whole plot was that he was insecure about himself and he tried to act tougher than he was. Now, and went for like 4 episodes, had nothing to do with anything with the end of that season. But we don't have that here. So having said that, I'm excited to see where it goes. I hope that some of the behind the scenes sort of stories that I've heard are not true, where I guess Pedro Pascal almost quit the show, and he because he wanted to show his face more often, and he was mad that the episodes were more episodic rather than a connecting arc. And hopefully that's just a bunch of Hollywood rumors and stuff. But so far a promising start to see where it's going to go, especially with that final cameo and how this what seems like an inconsequential plot is going to be consequential.
Yeah, before you get in, David, I just want to talk about that Pedro Pascal thing. I had heard some of those rumors as well, and they were the most confusing things ever, because it's like, okay, you're getting ready to start season 2, you're getting into season 2, and now you're realizing it's episodic. Now you're realizing that this character, whose whole entire point is he comes from a sect of people who don't take off their helmets, and you're like, why am I not showing my face more? I'm kind of with you. I'm thinking it's just like BS Hollywood speculation, is like a limited hangout to not get into the real details of whatever the controversy was. But he's here, and honestly, there is a moment in the show, which we'll get to in this episode, this chapter, sorry, where I thought, oh, maybe he did leave the show. But we'll talk about that in a bit. David, what did you think of the Marshal?
I liked it for the most part. I mean, I didn't think it was like great or amazing. It felt more like a chapter rather than a season opener, if that makes any sense. I mean, it's if you were to, I don't know, if this were to be your first Mandalorian episode, I don't think you'd be too lost, but I don't know how hooked or amazed you would be unless you were a diehard Star Wars fan. And if that case, then why would this be your first episode that you're watching? But you know, I'm glad it's back. It's great to be back on this journey with Mando. I even forget his real name, but there you go. See, it's good to have other people here.
I'd forgotten it.
Why would I just have me talking anyway? But you know, it's good to catch up with him finally, and I don't think they've necessarily dropped the beat as far as, you know, production quality. In fact, there's probably things that they've improved upon that we don't even know. You know, I was reminded here in this episode that Timothy Oliphant was going to be in this season, and here we are. He's in this episode, playing the titular Marshal. I was also reminded that Marshal is spelled with one L. Yeah.
I was too.
Maybe I'm so used to seeing like Marshall with 2 L's that maybe because of the store or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, I did like it. I was a bit not much of an eye roll in my part, but maybe a slight groan knowing that we were going back to Tatooine once again. You know, like, oh, okay. Is there like some kind of gravitational pull in the Star Wars universe that we always have to go back to Tatooine?
When Din Djarin said we're going back to Tatooine, I've been there before. I'm like, we've all been there.
We've all been there, bro. We feel you. Yeah. I mean, how do you think, you know, Boba feels? Anyway, again, at the same time, I do like the returning to some of the creatures that inhabit Tatooine, and at least we're going to places on Tatooine that we haven't been to before, and picking up, like, kind of revisiting people that we met, you know, briefly, somewhat in the last season. So overall, I was entertained. I felt like there were some predictable aspects to this plot-wise and beats that I just kind of put up with and moved along with. It's not like I'm unhappy with those, you know, plot lines or beats. It's just like, okay, we're doing this again, kind of thing. You know, it's not like it's unsatisfactory. It's just that, okay, I thought that we would get, maybe right from the get-go, I thought we would get something like really different or something, but no, you know, it's don't break what's, you know, what they have going for, and this is what we're rolling with, and hopefully in the next couple episodes maybe we'll get something a little bit different. Chapters.
Yeah, that's for those watching, that's something that we've been struggling with for like the last week, is referring to this, but you know, episodes or chapters. Now we don't even know what number we're on, and yeah, it's crazy.
2020.
What is Baby Yoda there, or sorry, the child think?
Oh, this guy. This guy, my mom actually got this for me, and he's a little movable She sent me pictures. She's like, "Do you want one of these?" And I'm like, "Well, how am I going to say no to mom?" So she's like, "Here you go." But yeah, interestingly enough, I think maybe a lot of us thought that maybe there would be a little bit more Baby Yoda in this episode, considering the popularity of the character and everything, and the intrigue behind the character. I guess overall, I was okay with that. That there was very, very much less Baby Yoda than maybe a lot of people had hoped for. Again, it is not called the Child or Baby Yoda. It's called the Mandalorian. So we have to settle for more revelations in the upcoming chapters.
Yeah, I really dug this episode. And I think that opening 10 minutes when you talked about Tatooine, that was one of my big gripes because it's like we've all been there many times. The Mandalorian has even been there. Like if there hadn't been so much Tatooine in the first season, it might be like, oh, cool. But no, it just felt like almost like they had achieved creative bankruptcy like right out of the gate. But also there was the scene with the gangster who I guess was voiced by John Leguizamo. Did I see that right?
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah.
Correct. I didn't know that was him. I was like watching the episode. It said John Leguizamo. I'm like, where was John Leguizamo? And then when I saw his name, I'm like, yeah, John Leguizamo is versatile.
I got to go back and like watch that scene again because it was one of those scenes where there was an actor who was buried under makeup, or maybe it was CGI enhanced because it was like the face was really impressive as an alien face talking. And I was like, that sounds like a voice that I know and I really should know, but I can't put my finger on it. And I'm watching the show, so I'm not going to pause it and go look up who the voice actor was. But at the end, I'm like, John Leguizamo, crap. But I like the idea of Mando finding an underground like fight ring, and it's two Gamorrean guards like beating the crap out of each of those axes. But at the same time, when there's like the switcheroo and Leguizamo's character tries to pull one over on the Mandalorian, and there's all these guns coming out, and then it just turns into like John Wick, where he's like beating up all these people. I'm like, all right, this just feels very fan servicey to me. Like, yeah, let's just see him fight more people. He brings out the little rocket pad with all the little missiles that shoot out. We've seen this like the third or maybe the fourth time we've seen that in 9 episodes. And then it's like, we're going back to Tatooine, and here's Amy Sedaris again. I guess she pulled really well with the fans in the first one. It just felt like, what did people like? Let's give them more of that. But when it actually settles into the story and we meet the Marshal right off the bat, I'm like, crazy intrigued by this, because Timothy Oliphant is basically the sheriff of this abandoned Mos Eisley style spaceport. And
Pelgo.
What was it called?
Pelgo. Pelgo.
Right. I wrote it down. I wrote a bunch of notes, but I don't want to go flipping through pages. That is unsexy. So Mos Pelgo, it's great. It's like a little Western town. It's kind of sparsely populated compared to other places we've seen in the Star Wars universe. But they've got this giant Tremors-like worm that rips up the street every once in a while, and it's a giant problem. And so before the Marshal and the Mandalorian, Mando can fight to the death, because Mando wants the armor, the very familiar armor that the Marshal is wearing, to reclaim it for his people, because he has heard there's a Mandalorian on Tatooine. He needs to find him so he can find the Jedi that he can return the child to, or help find the Jedi can help find the child's race or people, because it's a very mysterious creature, right? Turns out it's not a real Mandalorian. It's a guy who has appropriated the armor, and Mando's like, you need to give that to me or I'm going to kill you. It doesn't belong to you. Right before they can do a shootout, giant worm comes, rips up the street, and we're on to a completely different plot. Now, I immediately thought about Tremors, and which is
Dune. I'll have to say, how cool would it have been if Timothy Oliphant's character would have been played by Kevin Bacon? I mean, that would just be awesome, or Fred Ward, but that's all right.
That would have been, and there's still room for them in this universe. But no, what I loved about Timothy Oliphant's character, aside from the fact that I think he's a fun and really interesting actor, is when you first see him, you see him in the Mandalorian armor, but it doesn't fit. And you can tell it's like It's almost it makes me wonder how small a dude Boba Fett was, because the chest plate is like riding high. It's almost like a sports bra in this guy. The helmet's big, the chest plate's small. It's just these kind of parts that were cobbled together, but he's wearing this kind of a cool red, almost like a red sheriff's outfit underneath this stuff.
Yeah.
And it turns out that he that port used to be a really big deal under the Empire, but then when the Empire collapsed, there was a power vacuum. A miners' guild took it over and like killed half the people. He got out of town with some valuable gems, ended up trading with Jawas. This story just gets so insane as it goes on. And I love the different layers that we're getting with the story that are also giving us these great little callbacks to the Star Wars universe.
Right.
What happened to Boba Fett? Well, last time we saw him, he was, diving into that Sarlacc pit. Turns out his armor, I guess, survived. Or I'm having a mental picture of Jawas like diving into the Sarlacc pit, or maybe up the other end and finding all this stuff in there, putting it in their transport. I don't know, but he's using this to protect the people, and that comes into play later.
If I remember correctly, in the Marvel comics,
which are no longer canon. Are they?
I know. In the 80s, in the Marvel comics, he was apparently, or maybe it might have also been in the novels, but he was apparently spit out by the Sarlacc. Maybe his what is it, Beskar? Beskar armor. Maybe that's it's not really digestible. So he was spit out, and we'll have to get to that because that happens in the Crate Dragon as well later on in this episode. But he was spit out apparently, and so maybe the Jawas weren't really digging too much into that teethy hole. There's a horror movie about that too. No, kind of. It's a little bit of a body horror. But
no, here's real quick. Wasn't there? I thought there was like a novel that I had heard about when I was a kid about Boba Fett surviving the Sarlacc pit, and I thought I had read that Dengar actually put him back together. Like Bandage Man was the one who found him and helped put him back on his feet.
I mean, if anybody was to put him back, it'd be Bandage Man Dengar. I mean, it'd be perfect. I believe it is actually the Marvel comics. I think it was Star Wars number 50, and it had a really cool painted cover. And I think that was a huge issue because that was when we were going to learn what happened to Boba Fett. So apparently he got spit out. And if that kind of, if the writers here are going off of that, that kind of makes sense that, I don't know about all this time, but if he is to be this nomad on Tatooine all this time, who ironically looks like Aquaman's father, and he's just kind of roaming around on Tatooine, it would kind of make sense that he didn't go anywhere after he got spit out and just kind of collected himself and just wanted to just live his. Actually, after all, he is the son, the only, I guess, legitimate son of Jango Fett, the prototype for all the clones, and maybe he just wanted to have nothing to do with anything anymore and just wanted to live a life of solace and solitude on Tatooine of all places. But it's interesting. I know a lot of people last season were talking about, Boba Fett, they're gonna bring back Boba Fett. I was one of those that was like, I'd rather not, but here we are. He is legitimately back. Sorry. I'm fine with that. If anybody was to come back and play him, it's cool that Tamara Morrison's playing him because I've always liked him. Check out Once We're Warriors, great movie. I don't know. I'm wondering how much more we're gonna have of him. Of course, there's that ending, kind of that tag a bit with him there. A lot of people are saying, was he the one who was at the end of that one episode with where they showed the feet and stuff? I don't know. Who knows?
Because that was on Tatooine as well, right? That was the one with the. So. Yeah.
So it could have been.
Yeah, where the bratty kid got shot, and
that's right. Yeah. Who knows? I don't know. I don't. All I really care about is this current mission that the Mandalorian's on, and if he does, it's interesting how this starts off because I did appreciate the recap right away. You know, that was it was nice to remember. Thank you.
That was a lifever because
Yeah,
I
I was
forgot like
oh,
half the
yeah.
things.
Because it was suggested that, like, hey, you should find more of us, meaning Mandalorians, in order to help you find more of his kind, which is very interesting to me. So is there some type of connection or some type of knowledge that the Mandalorians have of a lot of different races that maybe other cultures don't? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out.
It would make sense if that's the case. And sorry, Mike, I'll let you jump in here now. We've been kind of back and forth, but
Right.
brief sidebar because I forgot to mention this at the top. For those who are watching live, if you have any questions or comments or theories or anything, please drop them in the chat, and as they pop up, we'll address them. But to what you just said, David, it makes sense that the Mandalorians would be the prime people to figure out who this creature is, because if they are sort of a race of bounty hunters and they've gone all over the galaxy like hunting prey, they've probably come across a lot of weird things that people know about and people don't know about, and maybe they've got secrets that nobody knows about beyond their order. So that's kind of a cool idea. So Mike, jump in with anything we've been talking about. Ring a bell for you?
Yes. So, as you guys probably remember, I left a sort of comment that said, well, I guess we know who the central antagonist of the story is. And what I meant by that, now that we reveal this, is if you watch season 1, right? The entire episode is basically about the Mandalorian kind of going off on odd jobs, and then he finally stumbles across the child. And when we get to the child, the entire rest of the season is about that. So now they're kind of using the same formula here, where it ends with that shot of Boba Fett without his armor. He's got the two sort of metal sticks. He turns around. He's got the scar. Looks badass. Oh, cool, cool. So now I think what it's setting up is the plot for the rest of this season, which will be Boba Fett will probably be standing in the way of Mando. He will be maybe we don't know how it'll play out. If I were to theorize, he does have that hatred against the Jedi. You had Mace Windu, who decapitated his dad back in the Clone Wars. So maybe he'll lead the Mandalorian to the Jedi, or try to, and then try to kill the Jedi, or try to convince Mando to kill the Jedi. And since Mando's essentially painted as a good guy, he'll try to stop Boba Fett from doing that. They'll fight each other, be a big climactic fight, like probably by the end of last season. Boba Fett will nearly be dead. And then towards the end, you'll find out he's still alive, which will set up season 3. Now, I could be totally wrong and look like a complete idiot. But essentially, I think it's setting up, especially with the way he was framed, with the lower pitch of the Mandalorian theme with the horn. When Boba Fett walked towards the camera, they're essentially introducing him as a threat. So instead of just playing fan service and introducing Boba Fett, it's like, oh, he's actually in here for a reason. And honestly, you can't do this show without addressing Boba Fett, because, for decades, you had the expanded universe showing how he survived and all that, but essentially nothing was officially said as canon. And now we can officially say, no, he didn't die. It's just some gag that George Lucas thought of at the side. Now we have a reason for seeing him. So I think the rest of this season will really focus on Boba Fett and him standing in the way of Mando, and Mando running into the Jedi, which, of course, I mean, let's face it, we're all pretty sure that Rosario Dawson.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. I got it right. Good. All right. So Rosario Dawson will be Ahsoka, and somehow Ahsoka and Mando will team up against Boba.
That's
possibly.
I like that as a theory. I don't know if I would think that that's going to be the primary driver for the season, because we still have, was it Gideon with the black, the dark lightsaber? So,
yes, the dark saber will certainly play a role in that too. Yeah,
right. I just feel like there's going to be. Here's my theory. When we see Boba Fett as this sort of desert drifter, he's in these like black robes and he's got some kind of like equipment with him. I'm wondering if when he got spat out of the Sarlacc pit and the Jawa scavenged or stole his armor, maybe he just isn't really anything without those tools that he's got. The armor he doesn't have to protect him, the weapons he doesn't have to protect him. So he has to live out in the desert. Maybe him seeing the Mandalorian and also the Marshal who's wearing his old armor is going to, maybe he's thinking, I've got to find a way to hook up with those guys and either steal it back or maybe find out where they're going, because if they're going back to where there are other Mandalorians, maybe I can get back into the Order. Like, he's been stranded with no way to communicate or get off the planet. And perhaps that's going to be something where he does team up with them. They do go, on this mission, but they do wind up teaming up with the Jedi or going to the Jedi to return the child. And that's where there's the conflict. Like, wait a second, we're going where?
Right.
Yeah. But I think either, theory is valid, and they both set up some immense possibilities for a story. I just think I would like to see, kind of like what we saw here, these two Mandalorians sort of who don't quite know or like each other having to team up for a greater cause. I'd like to see that, explored deeper with two actual Mandalorians from kind of different generations and different philosophies having to come together to solve some major problems, possibly involving the remnants of the Empire.
Yeah, I don't really care for Boba to be an antagonist. I'd prefer to him to be a shadowy character that we maybe eventually see. I would hope that eventually at some point he has a conversation with Mando. Because think about the knowledge that this guy has compared to our Mandalorian. I mean, he's the OG and he has seen things, from long ago that this guy just doesn't even know of. And the fact that the Mandalorians, that's a very interesting question, is that if Boba Fett and his father were basically kind of, the clones, the templates for the clone troopers, at what point did the Mandalorians come into play? That their culture, their people, did it derive from, after at what part of the Clone Wars did that occur? What's the connection there? So it's very interesting to see where they're going to go with that, or if they're going to touch on that. But I would at some point like to see that conversation take place. I really don't think that. Maybe not. I really don't think that they're going to use Boba Fett as much as the fans would maybe want them to. Or if there's any fans out there like me, I would rather see him just be this kind of like shadowy, ancillary figure with his own secret agenda of something. Interesting theory on maybe his, distaste for the Jedi and everything. Obviously, we are going to see the Jedi at some capacity this season, which would be interesting. I did get a kick out of, you touched on this, Ian, seeing Cobb Vanth, Timothy Oliphant's character, in the armor in the first shot, and it, again, very much shot like a Western, the introduction of characters, you're in a bar, you're in a desolated town, there's names that are dropped that, the Weequay bartender is like, oh, we don't talk about that or whatever, whatever. They're very common Western tropes, which is fine. Star Wars has always been, very much has a lot of, Western feel to it. I did get a kick out of that when he's in the doorway introduced, and it just reminded me of when Leia first saw Luke. A little small for a stormtrooper, aren't you? It just seemed like this is a guy who was really dying to cosplay as Boba Fett. And he just happened to find a really good replica on eBay, and he just thinks he looks like a badass on this, with this armor, and here he goes. But again, there's no doubt that is Boba Fett's armor. If you're aware of Boba Fett and his armor, I mean, it's got the dent in the temple right there when he puts the helmet down in the table at the bar before he pours his blue vodka or blue lemonade or whatever. It wasn't blue milk. It was some kind of blue beverage.
Let's just say like Clockwork Orange version of blue milk.
right.
It was Blue Moon.
Yeah, but it's again the Western trope. It's Timothy Oliphant. I mean, he's got this Southern drawl. which is, kind of justified, get it.
Uh-huh.
And it just, it's you could eye roll at that. It's like, okay, we're really hitting the Western trope, really hard here, but it's so fits, and it's so kind of perfectly cast.
It wasn't the dead wooden performance.
Oh yes, yes, it's true. It's true. Very good. And again, the last thing we need is another bar fight or another, shoot down or a draw, and all of a sudden there's this big rumbling, and they have to figure out, okay, what's going on here. At least Mando does, because obviously this Cobb Vanth guy knows all about what's happening. And it's interesting that this is the first time we actually get to see a crate dragon in a live Star Wars universe. It showed up in the comics and novels, and the first time we heard a crate dragon was from old Obi-Wan when he was scaring off the Tusken Raiders in A New Hope. That he was using a crate dragon call to scare off the Tusken Raiders who were rummaging through Luke's sand speeder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so it's a nice callback, pun intended.
And KOTOR shows him as well there. Like when you go to Tatooine, you have to fight him, and when they find the little pearl inside of him, you get like extra XP if you find the pearl in the game within the crate.
Right. Yeah, that's Knights of the Old Republic, and
I was wondering about that because they make a big deal out of that shot, but I didn't know what the hell I was looking at. I was like, oh, is this going to be an Easter egg, like almost a literal Easter egg?
Right, literally. I mean, apparently if you find a pearl inside the carcass of a crate dragon, obviously it has some powerful qualities. It can be kind of strong in the Force. It could be a good mojo for you. It's interesting. I sent you guys that link about that and everything, but it does show up in various, it showed up in Knights of the Old Republic video games and also in various novels. But, it's one of these things that I appreciate about, the Mandalorian series is that it does, if you are well-versed, it does drop you these, I wouldn't even say Easter eggs for fans. So it drops you these nuggets, that have been in the Star Wars universe for, quite a while, not in the main movies, but it's nice that it's acknowledged. And who knows what else they would do with that if we see Tusken Raiders, Sand People, later on, if they have a nice little, whatever, a plexiglass case for their crate dragon pearl, who knows? But again, going back to what you said about Cobb Vanth's backstory. Again, it's nice, and I think they did this a little bit in last season. It's nice to see kind of flashbacks in the Star Wars universe. Yeah. And I thought it was funny how this whole flashback thing was while the two of them were on their respective speeder bikes on the way to the Crate Dragon's lair. And it's just like, first of all, can you have a decent conversation, on speeder bikes while you're, I mean, they're good. You're going pretty fast. There's sand all over the place. It's like, and it's like, okay, but for the story's sake, it's nice to say, well, this is what happened. I mean, and again, that's totally a Western thing where these two, loner gunslingers are on their horses on their way to find somebody or something, and they're like, so, how did you get to this point? So it was nice to see those, kind of callbacks. And
I also like that the Marshal's bike appeared to be a repurposed engine from a pod racer.
Yeah. It looks a little bit like Anakin's racer with the little yellow bits on the end of it. Yeah,
totally.
Oh, man, it was a lot of fun. It's one of those things where it's not an obvious callback. Like, let's just have Greedo pop up. It's let's use the stuff that's actually in this universe and build a story around it and make it into a storied element. But yeah, I mean, the flashback stuff is great because you also get the sense of like the bartender is a part of this guy's life. It's not just some dude who's working in a bar. Like they knew each other back and they had this kind of like a life pact kind of a deal when everything went down after the, post Empire. And also, there's such great little story beats in here when we get to what I'd like to call, I guess, leading up to the Rock Ridge portion of this, the main plot of this is sort of out of Blazing Saddles, where you've got the Port Town people who are very prejudiced against the Sand people, because I guess the Tusken Raiders had raided their settlement at some point and killed a lot of people and done some damage. So there's a real animosity there, and it's mutual. But they have to team up to take down the dragon. But leading up to that, there's a couple of cool campfire scenes where we learn that Mando actually speaks Tusken Raider language, and just
hilarious to watch.
Well, it's hilarious. It's also kind of touching because you really know that the creators thought about it. It's not just like language; it's also like sign language and verbal communication. And
they're not just these crazy savages. Like, they actually have a land that was probably taken from. They're sort of like an allegory for the Native Americans in a way. Like, probably the rest of everybody else took their land from them, and they own Tatooine, so they hate them. And I think they're wearing masks to cover their identity, or is that like their actual face?
I think it's just part of their culture.
Yeah.
There's something else going on under. Yeah, I always thought when I was a kid and I had the action figure, I thought, oh, they just have these weird faces with metallic eyes. But no, I think that's protective covering for the elements or whatever. Like David's saying, possibly part of their culture. But no, I think this might be the first time in Star Wars. I don't know about the comics or the books, but where we actually see them as a culture, really, like in. Was it Revenge of the Sith, or was it wherever Anakin killed? Okay, was it clones or Sith?
No, it was Sith.
Where they took his mom and he went on a rampage and killed all of them.
Yeah. Or that was clones, right?
Clones, yeah.
Okay.
But we see that they have villages and children and all that. But it's just literally a quick glimpse of that before they all get cut down. Here we see that they're communicating. They work together. They have, it's the first time that we actually see them as, I guess, humanoids and not just kind of the other. And the wonderful scene later on where it's like this Dances with Wolves moment, where they're trying to kind of break bread or whatever the hell that liquid. It almost looked like the stuff out of was it Prometheus?
Oh yeah.
Pathogen.
They cracked open something and a little smoke.
Yeah. And the marshal was supposed to drink it, but he's like, I'm not drinking that. And Mando's like, you're insulting, you're insulting our guests. And then everything kind of blows up. And there's another scene later on where they're trying to put the stuff together for the dragon, and some, hick settlement guy gets into it with one of the Tusken Raiders. There's all this like great cultural conflict that you don't really expect to see in this kind of a show. And if the filler episodes that are coming up, because there have to be focused on these kinds of moments, or even just like to what David was saying, a long episode worth conversation of Boba Fett and the Mandalorian talking about like philosophy and history and what's been going on in the years, I would totally be down for that.
Yeah,
my dinner with Andre, the Mandalorian edition.
my dinner with Mando.
Inconceivable. That would be great. Oh, Wallace Shawn totally needs to show up in this series.
God,
that would be awesome.
He's Rex, and the other.
That would be great. I definitely can relate to really enjoying some nice character moments, and I think this was written and directed by Favreau. I have to, and I think I've seen write-ups about this already, is like, I can't help but to think about how we have two cultures, two different parties being forced to get along, because of a larger threat. And that is something that we've seen quite often in a lot of different genres, actually. But it is something out of folklore about how, when you have a culture that sees differently than another culture, at some point, because they live within the same vicinity in the same planet, they're gonna have to come to terms with working together or getting along, at least temporarily, for some kind of a larger threat. And if sometimes it takes a man coming into town. I mean, again, very Western, a man coming into town and bringing them together, or getting hired to solve this problem. And what he's really solving is this disunity, or this lack of harmony in the social climate here. And you could easily say, oh, well, this applies to today. Well, it always applies to today. I mean, we should be trying to see, put ourselves in other people's shoes and try and understand other cultures. Going back to that whole campfire thing, it kind of makes sense that Mandalorian, being what we assume to be a bounty hunter, right? A bounty hunter should be able to know a lot about a lot of different cultures in order to blend in order to become one, with whatever culture he needs to blend in with. And you should have a knowledge of them, should be able to speak a lot of languages, whether it's sign language. And on that note, before I got on here, I did read something about how they did hire specialists in sign language to actually work on the Sand People's language. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, it as I was watching this, it was making sense that I feel like even in those scenes, we're obviously learning a lot more about Mandalorian, about Mando, and it's kind of cool that if you're watching this just for pure entertainment's sake, you may not be picking up on that right away. But if you're watching this to learn more about this mysterious character, Favreau is dropping some nuggets here, and some character development that's subtle, but pertaining to the actual story of the chapter. But overall, it's opening up this bigger picture of who he is. It's kind of cool.
Very much so.
I like how one thing you really learn throughout this show more and more is Mando is an incredibly intelligent individual. He knows how to bring people together. There's a level of empathy to him, but he also knows how to pull himself out of various situations. He doesn't do it because he has a Jedi power or a high midichlorian count. I hope they don't go there. But it's because he's someone who just knows how to think his way out of a situation. And yeah, he was able. I mean, it just reminds me a little bit of the 4th episode in the 1st season, the one that Bryce Dallas Howard directed, where he had to save a village from a looming threat. So like he always seems to be the bringer of peace. I guess that's why I sort of predict this season will be sort of a clash of beliefs and between, because I really like your note, Dave, about how Mando and Boba Fett might have this clash of ideas and beliefs that could lead to a conflict that could go from verbal to something that is physical. I don't know if they'll get that intelligent with it, but this is certainly a very promising sign where in this episode, we're taking these people that we have this sort of generalized belief of throughout the Star Wars history, going from episode 4, whatever, to Star Wars, A New Hope, although originally in Star Wars, that's another conversation, to the Sand People going and killing Anakin's family. He killed a woman and the children, but that's okay, throughout the Clone Wars until he kills the Younglings, and that's going out of line, And here we really get to know the Sand People as people, and I would love to see sort of more of those ideas being projected on Star Wars, because it's also because Star Wars is made for kids. Although I dejected that originally, Dave was right about that when he came on my show talking about Phantom Menace. Star Wars is still made for kids, even when they're killing kids in it. And this is a great way to sort of show children in the audience the importance of acceptance from something that that seems a bit alien to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I was going to mention. I'm glad you brought it up, Mike, is that this is a show that's on Disney Plus. And for as much as it's made for, 30 and 40 and older geeks who, in their, Star Wars is part of our DNA, and it's a lot of fan service, but really quality fan service, I think. Mm-hmm. It is also something that, kids can watch. Maybe not like little kids, although there's nothing quite too horrific, I don't think, in it. But it is a great way for kids to get lessons in a way that's not ham-handed or, we'll say, overtly political. This is sort of an apolitical show which has political messages that are universal. Like, if there's someone you don't understand or you think you might hate but you don't know them, maybe just try breaking bread, work together to solve problems, and you're going to find out that, to use that cliche, people are people. And it's a wonderful message that I think is kind of always been with Star Wars, but really having it spelled out in a straightforward fashion in the middle of an adventure story, which is quite thrilling. I mean, we haven't even talked about the actual dragon takedown. I thought, for as predictable as it was, I thought it was shot really well. I was amazed that they could get so much dynamism out of an essentially brown, like monochrome palette. Because there's scenes there where you've got the desert landscape, the desert colored dragon, the sand people who are all like earth tones, and then the settlers who are covered in dust, and so they're basically earth tones. But there's never a moment where you're like, I can't tell what's going on. I don't care what's going on. The colors pop, even though there's just one color, essentially.
Right. Yeah, I thought about that too.
Very Alexa. I'm just trying to think of what camera they shot that on now.
I'm really curious about some of those aerial shots, and how like the way the story develops is overall very, very well done. Very well paced out, and that climactic scene where they all got to come together and take down the crate dragon. I thought it was very cool. It wasn't easily resolved, which was kind of cool. It reminded me a bit of and I usually say this in a way that's kind of like, kind of taking a stab at whatever movie or TV I'm watching, TV show I'm watching. But it kind of reminds me a little bit of a video game where it's like, we found out how to destroy the beast in order to continue, but it's going to take some really difficult maneuvers, and it's going to take me dying more than twice, and it's going to take me, I'm going to have to actually go up and around it and move it around and hit it from the side, from up on top, and then go back down to the ground level and try and detonate these things. Oh, that didn't work, so now we have to use our rocket packs to launch up. And I didn't actually mind that at all in this one, just maybe because this was probably because of what all built up to this point in the chapter. I was so well vested in these cultures coming together, these two characters leading them, and also I just wanted to see more of this dragon. Especially, I was just really curious as to how they were going to do this on a TV level. It was very, very interesting to see. Like, I think earlier on, they come across like smaller versions of the crate dragon, I guess you would say. And Mando is kind of like, at first Oliphant's character was just going to like shoot them, but Mando just kind of approached them, and kind of had his way. I guess he speaks to all characters, all creatures. So it was interesting to see then this big, huge character, because we knew it was like, a character from Tremors, it rumbles and rattles the ground. But is it going to be so easy to kill this thing, or is it going to be, what are the challenges? And so we saw some of those challenges, and I thought it was, like you said, very dynamic and impressive for, just a television series.
Yeah. Disney has that kind of money now, I think, especially now since, we don't know if movies are going to come out into the theater. They have that money to pour into it. And I don't know if anyone's seen the behind the scenes of how they make this.
A little bit, yeah.
But it's amazing because they finally are ditching the green screen, and like when they're flying in the background and stuff like that, like they're actually seeing that, and it's being projected on the screen. And when George Lucas came to the set, he said, "This is always what I wanted to do past the green screen." So, and if you could please George Lucas, that's a hard thing to do. And they were able to do that. So I love how they're able to really advance not only just the television medium in terms of visual effects, but also the medium of film, if we ever get theaters back, as to how we can approach visual effects. And yeah, it's a groundbreaking show in that respect. There were some shots that looked a little CGI-ish, which, like with the way some of the pit droids are moving and stuff like that. But essentially, it's incredible.
Yeah,
like it looks better than some of the stuff, some of the shots from Episode 3. With the flat backgrounds and everything. But that's because the thing is, film as much on camera as possible.
Technology's come away.
Yeah. Don't film too much on camera. Like Christopher Nolan will do that, and sometimes it just looks like phony, But yeah, they do a wonderful job with that. And I'm thrilled to see how much further they're gonna get with this.
Yeah, there were times when I remember that this is a television show because it looks like so much of a movie. And even if theaters were up and running, they wouldn't show this because it's a TV show. But I was thinking, wouldn't it be great if you could pay to go see The Mandalorian on the big screen, like in weekly, kind of like serial installments?
Well,
Right.
you could rent AMC to do that for like $100.
Yeah, you could rent the new 400 theater on the north side.
Yeah.
Hey, I would not be opposed to that.
Yeah,
But one thing I kind of mentioned this earlier regarding the Pedro Pascal dispute and how he almost left the show, allegedly. There is a scene in the climactic fight where Dragon is bearing down on them and they're trying to get these explosives into its belly or something. And Mando and the Marshal are like, this is kind of our darkest hour. And Mando turns to Marshal and says, take care of the kid. And then he like kicks his rocket and sends him, flying to get him out of the way. And then he essentially flies into the belly of the beast. There was a part when I was thinking, I don't know if they're actually going to do this, but how amazing would it be if they killed off our main Mandalorian in the first episode of this first chapter of the second season and had the rest of it be about Timothy Oliphant and the child. They could get away with that because the series is The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
It could be the guy like, okay, now I have to earn this armor. It's about something bigger than me. Of course they bring Mando back, but for just a brief second, I'm like, I would trust that thought could have been in the mind of the people who created this show.
Right.
Instead of just like a throwaway thing.
Yeah, it's a nice little bit of a red herring really quickly. And yeah, you're thinking, oh, are they going to go there? And we've seen protagonists, heroes, get swallowed up by a beast and survive. It's even in cartoons, but is this really going to happen? For a hot second, you're like, oh, could they go there? I mean, they could, but it's like eventually let's say that does happen, like you just said, eventually when he meets up again with Carl Weathers' character, Gina Carano's character, it would be a totally different person underneath the mask, right? Underneath the helmet. So it's like, oh, well, that would be very intriguing. But of course, it turns out the way it does. I did like the idea of, or the how Cobb Vanth, his character just kind of played out, because he was a man of his word, and he did give up the Mandalorian armor to Mando. And he wasn't a traitor. He wasn't trying to, one up anything or he didn't have any, kind of devious intentions. He was just, he's like, help me get rid of this crate dragon and it's yours. And that happened. And that was kind of refreshing to me, because I didn't want another like, well, he really fell for that. And he takes off in his rocket pack or whatever. Yeah. I like that.
Well, speaking of that rocket pack, there was something that gave me pause, and I wondered if they were going to let him just be a nice guy, because in that flashback, when he gets the armor and he goes back into town and he starts taking out the people in the Miners Guild, he runs the rest of the miners out of town on a giant kind of transport. They hide there because they realize what he's got. We finally get to see what that little antenna thing is on top of Boba Fett's helmet. It's a tracking, like a sight, and then he them away. But that was the thing, is he actually used that rocket to kill a transport full of miners as they were fleeing. So whether or not that was justified, because they don't really say how long that occupation was going or what atrocities there were. If they just came in and they could have raped and pillaged and done all this horrible stuff, or they could have just been an occupying force who are squeezing money out of local businesses. Both terrible, but I don't know what exactly justifies just killing a bunch of guys who are running away.
Right.
So I'm wondering, there is that little bit of seed of him. And we also see in those argument scenes in the campfire, he's got a hot temper and he might not be the most culturally sensitive guy on the block. So you're kind of wondering, what kind of guy is this? And we're led to believe at the end that he's going to show up, which I kind of like, because I like this character, but that also means that we're going to be back on Tatooine again at some point.
Yes. Well, they did say, I hope our paths cross again. And
wink,
then
wink.
Says, as do I. It's like, well, they're going to see each other again. And that he might end up being a bad guy. Maybe him and Bobo fight against him. Who knows?
I just hope that the next time we see him, it's like they're in some deep part of space on the other side of the galaxy.
Yeah.
And Marshall shows up. He's like, "Oh yeah, I hitched a ride. I left Tatooine a long time ago, after our adventure, and now I'm here so that we don't have to like go back to Tatooine just to see the Marshal again."
Right.
I'm wondering how big Tatooine is because
It's a small world after all.
yeah, because exactly. Yes, because I can't remember the actress's name, but she was in the Amy Sedaris.
Yeah.
Yes. She was showing the map. She's like, this is Mos Eisley, this is Mos Espa, and this is Mos
Pelgo.
Pelgo. I'm like, wait, it's just those three? Like, how is this like a moon?
It's just part of the, part of the planet.
Because everyone seems to land at the same exact spot in every planet.
Yeah, there's the it talks about the Dune Sea. We've heard about that before. The Dune Sea is actually just the sand sea. It's not it's not water. It's a sea of sand.
Yeah.
So it is. Yes, we go back to Tatooine, but it is nice. This series is something that we had hoped would happen with some of the one-off movies. Like Han Solo and Rogue One, is to expand the universe, to expand the Star Wars universe. Still within it, something that we're somewhat familiar with, but expanding it. That's something that Rogue One couldn't do. It's something that Han Solo was restricted from doing, kind of, because it was a prequel leading up to something, and kind of so was Rogue One. So this is nice to have all these like sideways stories and within the universe. So again, is it kind of an eye roll to return back to Tatooine and not see some type of more exotic world with, I don't know, fluorescent colors or something, but we're back to earth tones and drab and robes. I don't mind it so much, but I'm really hoping for more variety in the future. I do want to double back on the rocket pack. I was excited to actually see it functioning.
Yeah,
because if you're of a certain age and you used to mail in order your Star Wars figures, you'll know that Boba Fett, after the Star Wars Holiday Special, Boba Fett, you could order, you could cut out your proof of purchase, little symbols from your card stock on your action figures, collect enough of them, send away for the Boba Fett action figure. And in some of the earlier versions, you press the rocket pack and a little missile shot out. But there's a whole rumor about some kid got swallowed it and choked on it or something. Now they had to make the rest of those Boba Fetts where the little red rocket couldn't come out. And everybody's like, oh, that kid ruined it for all of us. But it was nice. It was nice to see that rocket functioning. But I did question. I'm like, all right, so in that aforementioned flashback scene where he destroyed that transport that was getting away, all right, he used the rocket on that. So where did he get the other rocket that he used later on the Krayt Dragon? It's like, where do you store these rockets? I mean, they're not small.
That's what I'm wondering. Where does he get the rockets? Does he buy them or something?
How heavy are they? And when he got this armor from the Jawas in the Sandcrawler, when they rescued him, he basically he asked for the Mandalorian armor in a trade-off for these crystals. I guess the rocket pack was with that armor, but wasn't that rocket pack it didn't really help out Boba in the Sarlacc pit. It was kind of dysfunctional because I think it was Han Solo who accidentally hit it when he was blind, and that sent him careening off the Jabba's cruiser and cascading into the Sarlacc pit. So wasn't that damaged rocket pack anyway? And I don't know.
It was, and there was that nice little callback at the very end when the Marshal gives the Mandalorian the full suit of armor, and he's like, "Yeah, just let them know that I didn't cause this damage," or something like that in the rocket pack. But I'm just wondering. I did wonder about that rocket too, but I'm wondering if the Mandalorian rocket pack is sort of like a Pez dispenser. Like you get rid of one, there's like another warhead like kind of tucked behind it, and they just kind of refresh after you use them.
That thing's got to weigh like 60 pounds at least.
How do they know how does the helmet know that you're activating the radar? Like, he's not pushing a button or anything. He's using his brain.
It's the same way that the lightsaber knows how to stop at exactly the same height.
That's true. Well, that has to do with crystals, I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a
Kyber
Kyber.
crystals, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I did like in going back to that last scene with Boba Fett, you know, kind of in the twin sunset on the horizon there. If you looked at kind of, they don't get into too much details because it's kind of in the shadows, but if you look at what he's wearing, it does look like maybe at some point he was trying to blend in with the Sand People, you know, because it's kind of a robe type thing. But he is carrying some of their trademark weapons, you know, with he's got at least one of them with the kind of like that knob and pointy part at the end. So that's like a trademark, you know, Tusken Raider weapon. So you have to assume that he either knows the Sand People, he either has at some point maybe conquered one or two, or has a pact with them, or just has lived there long enough to just, you know, blend in, you know, when he needs to.
Maybe he blended in with one of those conversations with Mando and Timothy Oliphant, and we didn't know it was him.
Right. Could have been. That would have been
Wow.
interesting. Yeah.
We'll see that scene from a different perspective in another episode later on. That's a cool idea.
That would be very cool. Oh yeah, in like his own flashbacks. He's like, I've been following you this whole time. What are you talking about?
I was inside the rocket pack. No,
You have to kill the Jedi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
all right. Well, cool. Well, I think we've pretty much covered chapter 9 / chapter 1. And okay, if this is season 2, why isn't it volume 2?
I
We're
don't
talking,
know.
doing the whole book thing.
Yeah,
And
exactly
movies
right.
or episodes. Why are the TV series book metaphors? I don't get it.
Probably because they're
Volume
they're
2.
smaller. They're not, you know, they're not full length, you know, theatrical releases. So it's like chapters as opposed to episodes. Who knows? Who knows? I did.
If I didn't love this show so much, I would totally
Right.
just fit all of the pretentiousness.
I did on IMDb do a little sneak peek of the next episode, which is entitled, well, there's no title yet, but it is interesting to see that one of the actresses on the cast list is Sasha Banks, who's a professional wrestler, WWE, and she is, I think, playing the Jedi that we saw in the preview, in the shadows. So that should
You
be...
should read up to Ahsoka.
Maybe, you know, that should be very interesting. And, you know, in this next episode, we're going to, you know, be reunited with Giancarlo Esposito, Gina Carano, Carl Weathers. So I don't know how much time is going to pass between this chapter and the next one. But, you know, what's going to compel him to move on from Tatooine, and where does he go from here? How does he know where to go? Because again, his search is for more Mandalorians to help him find, you know, the child's kind, right? So, and how does he reunite with, you know, some of these other characters? It's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, I'm all in. I was very excited by the end of this chapter, much more than when it started. So yeah, we'll see. I'm excited to talk to you guys about this. Hopefully next Sunday, if we're all still around. I will actually be out of town, but I may still have live streaming capabilities. So at some point, we're going to come back and talk about chapter 2, the as yet to be titled follow up to this one. So thank you very much, guys, for hanging out on this lovely Sunday evening.
Yeah,
Talking Mando. And yeah, once again, Mike Crowley from YPA Reviews, you'll probably agree. David Fowlie from Keeping It Real. Follow their stuff, like their stuff, become obsessed with it. Hang out with us on the Kicking the Seat YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, click the bell, all that good stuff. And yeah, until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thanks very much. And we are ending the stream now.
cool. I'm going to go work on my sign language.